Morning, Carol Knackley, CEO of Crystal Energy. Dr. Carol, of course, today is an important day, not only because you're here, of course, it's Thursday, but ultimately the Fed, or not the Fed, but the US will announce its inflation rate for January. We're expecting, at least from forecasts, another bionic month of over 7%. How do you think this should be received, and how will it impact policy?
Good morning, Sean. I was wondering when you said today is a big day, and I was wondering what's happening today because of what's going on with inflation. It's been since last year. Every time like some officials expect lower rates, and boom, we're hit by bigger rates. So it's not anymore like a big thing. And actually, everybody's expecting even new record inflation rates to hit the US economy. Now, we might be surprised, but I really doubt it. What will that translate into the Fed's reaction? I don't think we're going to see a deviation from what they announced they were going to do, and that is increase interest rate. We have to wait and see in only a few weeks' time by how much they are going to start by increasing the rate. I stick to what I said before on the show, that I don't see it very alarming. I see it actually, there are two positive things into the story, if not three. That first of all, finally, we're getting some reaction to tame inflation. So a tighter monetary policy is the remedy to inflation, but at the end, it's striking the right balance between taming inflation, which is damaging to the economy, and decelerating economic growth, which is equally damaging to the economy. So that's one thing to be aware of. And for now, we cannot really tell which balance, how the Fed is going to strike that balance. The second thing is,
what do you think they should do? What would be your advice to Mr. Jay Powell in getting that balance? What does balance look like to you?
Increase interest rates gradually. Now, you cannot, and of course, I don't think they are going to do to jump straight from almost nothing to a very high interest rates. So they are going to do it gradually, but by how much? Let's see how the economy reacts. But there is the other side of the story, Sean, that is beyond, what the Fed is going to do. And I already started reading reports about easing pressure on supply chain bottlenecks. Remember last year, it was a big thing, and many blame the supply chain bottlenecks as driving inflation. So if we have, let's say, on the one hand, a more accommodative monetary policy whereby we see an increase in interest rate, gradual increase, and starting from a low base, and at the same time, supply chain bottlenecks start to ease, then we might not end up in the drastic scenario that some are fearing, and hopefully we get the economy growing in a more sustainable way than going into the down scenario of high inflation rates, causing the Fed to take more aggressive stand and maybe damaging the economy. So for now, I remain optimistic.
Maersk Shipping reported earnings yesterday, record in their history, and also in doing so forecast that they expect more of the same this year because of this. They expect the supply chain bottlenecks to continue. Let's go to Omar El Obeidly, Director of Research at Bahrain Center for Strategic International and Energy Studies, Darasat, a great acronym. I love acronyms. Darasat is my favorite one today. Omar, the oil price structure has kind of run out of a little bit of steam, it would appear, in recent days this week because of expectations that there are indeed progress being made in the Iran talks in Vienna. Your read on developments between the US and Iran?
I would have thought 2 months ago, I thought the likelihood of a deal was essentially zero. Of late, I think the likelihood of the deal seems to be elevated, driven primarily by American capitulation. It seems to be Biden's insistence that this deal be done, presumably because he just wants an excuse to wash his hands of the Middle East and take his attention elsewhere. And the Iranians have always been very effective negotiators and good at judging where the balance of power lies, and it definitely lies in their favor at present. Therefore, I would say at the moment, looking probably like a 50-50 chance of a deal. And as you say, that's affecting prices. But whether a deal happens or not, in the long run, I don't think it will make much of a difference regarding oil markets, because the continuation of US sanctions doesn't seem to be something that the Biden or Democrat administration is interested in. And eventually, Iran's already got numerous workarounds and ways to get around them. So I think that it's just going to affect short to medium term one way or the other, but in the long run, Iranian oil is going to be in the market either directly via its partners like China and Russia, or indirectly because the sanctions will be lifted.
Let's go to Italy. Reem Shamsuddin, senior correspondent at Zawiya Arabic, also former energy correspondent at Reuters. If we might, Reem, just start off with, I mean, there's a multitude of factors impacting the geopolitics of energy at the moment. But one this morning, a report out of Libya, that the Libyan prime minister, there was an assassination attempt on his life, which of course gives some indication of increased instability in Libya, where 1.2 million barrels of oil are produced every day. Your thoughts on that story? I'm not sure if you had a chance to review it, but ultimately, let's seek your insight if indeed you have. Reem, you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute. Yep.
Good morning. Good morning, Sean. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I've read the story, which broke overnight, probably like 2-3 hours ago. Yes, instability, we've talked about it before when I was on the show last month. Yes, last month. And there was like scheduled elections to happen. It didn't happen, obviously. So that sheds a lot of uncertainty on what's going to happen in Libya. Especially that the prime minister didn't want to step down, and that also like intensifies the all the tension that has happened that continue to affect production of Libya, or the resumption of more output coming from Libya. So yes, it continued like politically. Everything that's happening on the political side affects still production and output coming from Libya, and that's really pity because of what we talked about before, the importance of the Libyan crude, given its grade and what it can contribute also to alleviate the tightness in the market.
Reem, we've had reports, obviously, from many sources that OPEC Plus is failing to reach their production capacity. Of course, Libya is outside of the OPEC Plus agreement, but the OPEC Plus are at January about 800,000 barrels a day below their target, which is quite substantial, the tightest in the market. We had some analysis on this podcast earlier in the week from former colleagues that indicated or raised suspicions that when this agreement started, that possibly OPEC Plus countries had overestimated or overstated their actual capacities, and so now we're seeing the consequence of that. I wonder your thoughts on that analysis, if indeed the sort of capacity restrictions are due to overstated quota or capacities earlier in this agreement.
Well, actually, the whatever OPEC Plus or OPEC numbers, they are fed by what the countries, the member countries just report exactly. So it's not, and also from secondary sources. So we have two sources here. Now, underperforming or underproducing or not complying fully. We know that the baselines of the major producers in OPEC Plus is going to be revised soon. So this also would probably push countries, or push the overall output to be closer to 400,000 barrels per day, the increase that they are committed to put in the market. So this is soon probably this will help also with to bring more supply to the market.
I know, Carol, you have been somewhat critical of the analysis that says that the extra capacity in OPEC plus is nothing to be concerned about. We had earlier this week, obviously, Mike Muller describing that the OPEC plus spare capacity was declining over, his analysis was he expects it to decline over the coming period to what was fairly concerning levels. I think the language he was using was quite quite severe in terms of alarming was the word he used, declining to alarming levels. I know you last week you criticized media about these types of things, but I'm just saying here's one of the world's leading energy traders pointing in that direction. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, traders always like making a big thing out of something that might be a problem. But first of all, let me highlight three things. What you said about OPEC members overestimating the capacity of how much they can produce. Well, I see it differently. I see it actually that the key members knew exactly how much each country can produce in terms of capacity. But remember, for several months, every single month, there was a problem of many countries failing to deliver on their promises, and they were cheating. How do you impose discipline? I thought that was a very clever move, particularly from the Saudis. You tell them to produce much more than what they can put in the market, and therefore you overcome this big issue of OPEC discipline, and therefore we had this fantastic discipline so far, thanks to this very clever strategy. So that's the first thing. I don't think they overestimate. I think it was a very strategic decision made by the key players within OPEC.
I mean, I think I'm not making that analysis. I'm sharing what was made commentary earlier in the week by other commentators. Ultimately, I mean, as one tries to analyze where this tightness is coming from, because ultimately there's still a world in which there is supposedly 4 to 5 million barrels of idle OPEC plus capacity, and people are trying to understand, well, then why is the market so tight? Why are prices so high? And it's certainly not historically inaccurate to say that OPEC countries in the past have overstated their production capacity.
Yeah, but let me take you to the second point about why I don't subscribe to the term of alarming. What is alarming? What is the percentage of global production of OPEC spare capacity that we can qualify as alarming? For me, it was alarming in the first years of the century when it was less than 1% of global production. And also demand was rising at a massive rate because of genuine economic growth coming particularly from the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, who else, and China, of course. But today it's around 4% of global production supply. So is it alarming? Yes, it is declining. But if you look at the numbers for the rest of the year, you can see it actually is going to stabilize in the coming months of the year. And there is also a build up in the coming months of the year. That's why we're not saying that the market is currently not tight. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen the prices that we are seeing today, although you have to factor in the geopolitical risk premium. But what I'm saying is that how do you define alarming? What percentage of global production of OPEC spare capacity can we say that if we reach that level, then it is alarming? As I said, we are around 4% of global production today. Is it alarming because we've been in much worse situation where that spare capacity was below 1%? That for me is alarming.
Omar, it may be alarming when the president of the United States gives you a call and says, could you pump more oil, which seemed to have happened overnight. President Biden calling King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. Your thoughts on that call? Obviously, it's not unusual, but obviously the timing.
I mean, Biden is desperate. He thought that
he might call you up and say, listen, you know that 30 gallons you have in your car, could you send it this way, please?
I mean, he thought basically he's made numerous miscalculations, and the American public is quite upset, including many people who might traditionally vote Republican who voted for him in 2020, and they've not been happy with the outcome. And the Republicans are heading for a significant, I would say, resounding victory in at least the House and maybe even the Senate in the midterm elections. So that's actually one of the reasons for the elevated importance of the Iranian deal, and the capitulations, because he wants to get it done before Congress has a chance to interfere with anything that's going on there. So yes, the timing of the call, he is really desperate. He is trying to, first of all, hope. So there's two aspects. One aspect is that oil prices affect the polls in America in like no other factor. And secondly, adding to what Carol said about the supply chain disruptions, part of the problem, part of the inflation you're seeing in the US at the moment is down to elevated gasoline prices, and he wants gasoline prices to come down to give the Fed less of an excuse to raise rates. He doesn't want the Fed to raise rates and to cause, I don't know, I'm going to say a recession, but certainly to pull the brakes on growth just before what looks like it could be an incredibly damaging midterm election. I'm not surprised by the timing, to be honest. If it wasn't for his pride, Biden probably would have made the call a lot earlier. I think he was waiting out for the Saudis. The Saudis have correctly judged that Biden doesn't really like Saudi Arabia very much, and therefore, carved their own path out. He was slow to call them. He's called them now. To be honest, I don't think it would make much of a difference because, you said yourself, the spare capacity is a significant issue. Maybe, Carol differs on the extent to which it's an issue, but I think there's very little that can be done to bring oil prices down. And Biden is looking for a very.
Well, one would think that if Saudi Arabia announced we're going to add 1 million barrels of oil to the market tomorrow, that might have an impact on prices, as it did.
But why would they do that? I mean,
because clearly, I suppose from a U.S. government perspective, the Biden administration would be, there's demand for more oil and OPEC Plus is not meeting the commitment that they said they were going to do. So please, Fadl, can you make up the shortfall? It doesn't seem like an unreasonable posture to take, given the organization did say they were going to do X, they're doing half of X. Oil prices are going very high. You had the Indian lead energy commentator on yesterday saying that it was very, very serious for India. So this is not, I don't think, an out there kind of idea. Reem, your thoughts on where OPEC Plus, and obviously you were Saudi correspondent for many years. Where do you see this relationship going now? Obviously, Omar's indicating it's not in a healthy place.
Well, as Omar said, that the US has not so many options on the table to cool the prices down. I mean, we've seen that what they've done last year with 50 million barrels that from the stock drawdown. It didn't really help with prices. Now it's clear from Biden call with King Salman yesterday. It's clear that the King's position is to maintain the OPEC deal, means that Saudi will not put any extra barrels in the market. And we've seen also, like recently, the high oil prices have helped the US shale increase output. Like lots of companies are doing it, and we've seen it with rig counts, like an indicator to more output in the future as well. So actually, eventually, prices will go down, and we're coming also to the seasonality drop in demand in Q2 or Q3, and with the refinery undergoing maintenance. So there are a lot of things happening in the oil front and the gas front as well, with everything that's happening between Ukraine and Russia and the world. So even if Saudi adds more oil, it will really erode spare capacity and prices would still go up. So really, the options here are limited, and I don't think that the US and will realize that probably it's only like a phase where probably like there were analysts saying that there would be an oversupply in Q1, but probably that has been revised. I don't know.
If he had called MBS, he might have had more. I mean, his unwillingness to engage with MBS is clearly doesn't help his cause, I suppose, ultimately. Reem.
Yes.
In the sense of the decision-making power, obviously, it frustrates that relationship.
Eventually, I don't know when they're gonna talk, but probably like with King Salman. I mean,
maybe at $120, then maybe there's a price point. Let's go to the survey question and let everybody have a chance to have a view on this question of where the Fed will go? What does the Fed need to do? Not what will they do? What do you think they may do? What do you think they need to do at its next meeting in March to start to rein in inflation? Raise rates by 50 basis points, 25 basis points, or no rate hike at all? What does this room think they need to do in order to start to rein in inflation? And we have a story on Bloomberg today and indicating that maybe they need to move beyond. But Carol, oil prices and the market in general seems to be caught in a little bit of a sideways move here. We've got obviously the Iran nuclear talks looking like maybe. We've got the geopolitics, Libya, Ukraine, and so forth. And yet we have a really tight market. Demand is strong. U.S. economic growth is robust. Where do you see the shift that could move this market out of this standstill at the moment?
Yeah, before I answer that question, let me just add to the discussion you were mentioning earlier about Biden and the US and high prices, and Rim alluded to that we tend to forget that the US is the largest oil producer in the world, and of course the other largest consumer as well, but high prices are bringing benefits to the US economy, and not through their production, the producers, more money, more taxes paid to the government. Not only in the US, if you look at the OECD-based oil companies, I mean, you heard BP has turned into a cash machine, and now they are offering actually governments, host governments, and their main governments room for higher taxation, as you hear the debate in the UK. So that's another generation of revenues to the government. So that's just one point I wanted to allude to, because it's not just clear cut. In terms of where we are today and where we're heading next, again, are we going to look at the next few weeks or at the rest of the year? So if we're looking at the very short term, as you said, you can see that the market at the moment seems to have to be balancing around $90 a barrel, $91 a barrel for Brent, because we are seeing, yes, some diffusion of the tensions regarding geopolitics, but we haven't reached a final outcome yet. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen with Russia. Yes, we heard what Macron was saying about the promises of Putin, but it's not really cast in stone. We hear about progress vis-a-vis Iran, but does that mean there will be a deal? Again, we're not sure about the situation in other places, including Libya, as we discussed earlier today. So you have the geopolitical card is still not clear. On the other hand, yes, we're expecting higher supplies to come to the market from outside OPEC, but that is not coming necessarily now in the coming weeks. So I think the market will remain at this stage. If geopolitical tensions are resolved completely, the main ones, of course, they will never go to zero, then we will see downward pressure on prices. But if we remain in this situation and supply continues to be constrained, I see prices to remain in the region we are seeing today.
Omar, it does feel like we are in a definitive window of time, or we're in the kind of the doldrums, the place where there is no wind until there will be a storm in March. And that is the resolution one way or another on the Iran nuclear talks. It feels like they're kind of in their last window, either do or die. The Russian invasion of Ukraine or not in March. The Fed going to have to make a move. The Chinese coming out of the Olympic period, and in terms of holding everything down until the Olympics are over, and then sort of letting everybody start manufacturing at full throttle again. It does feel like we're in that space. Your thoughts on resolution of some of these big issues in the coming month?
Sorry to sound pessimistic, but I'm afraid that down the pipeline, this collection of leaders the world has at the moment is more than capable of manufacturing many more crises, and I don't think I think we're heading into a more protracted a period of fractious relations. And okay, today it's what's going on in Ukraine, but tomorrow it could be just as easily somewhere else. So I don't think I think this is going to be a protracted, several years of jumping from crisis to crisis, crisis to crisis.
But of these immediate crises that are right in front of us now, do you think they can drag into the second quarter, or do you expect some resolution?
Absolutely. They're going to drag into the rest of it because they all are manifestations of deeper problems, and they won't be resolved by sitting across a very long table from each other and communicating God knows how. No, I think it's going to take a lot more diplomacy and a lot more. I think that ultimately, with the US being as disengaged diplomatically as it is from all of these issues, you're going to have extended uncertainty, and you're not going to have a resolution anywhere near as definitive as you would like. And it's just going to be more and more bad news, I'm afraid.
In terms of that dot connecting, Omar, just to wrap up on that point, let's say the situation with Yemen that has been now the US sending more military hardware to deal with that. At the same token, the Iran talks in Vienna may or may not find a conclusion. How do you connect those dots, or indeed do you see them interconnected?
So I think that one of the sticking points. So it's clear that the Houthis, or what's going on in Yemen, that there is an escalation. Iran, whenever it's involved in its negotiations, escalates with its proxies in an attempt to secure more. And this is bargaining theory 101. And it's testing the US's commitment and ability to impose its will and to resolve these crises. And I think it's exposing in quite clear fashion that the US, at least given its current political configuration, is quite impotent and doesn't want to take the steps necessary. So what I'm going to see, what I imagine is just going to happen is a US capitulation, maybe to make the deal, but either way, you're going to see more instability in the Middle East, both in Yemen and other areas, because they're not getting any pushback when these Iranian proxies do whatever they want. I mean, they've attacked the UAE, they've attacked Saudi Arabia, they've attacked neutral ships and so on and so forth, and they've suffered no consequences. And so they will continue doing that to secure further gains for themselves and for their sponsors.
Let's get the survey result out and give Reem the last word this morning. 25 basis points seems to be the majority in this room. But coming up close on the inside is 50. I suspect that number may grow for 50 as these weeks pass. Reem, just to look back again at this OPEC Plus, obviously they're meeting again every month. The credibility of these 400,000 increases start to wane a bit. Your thoughts on obviously the end of this agreement isn't far away, and they're even meant to go to higher quotas. How do you see those things playing out in this coming months, given the credibility of the deal at the moment a little bit under review?
Yes, Sean. I believe that going forward, it's going to maintain the deal. I don't think that there's going to be a revision of the deal because of all the uncertainties that we mentioned, and there are some analysts that are estimating geopolitical premium between $8 to $9. So the uncertainties were behind the last decision, because they thought that everything that's happening geopolitically, and OPEC Plus also think that the price is not the high prices are not only due to fundamentals. So this is the first thing. The second, as I said before, that there might be a revision of the baselines of the top 5 producers: Russia, UAE, Kuwait, Saudi, and I think I mentioned, I forgot one. and this might deliver more of the 400,000 barrels per day. So OPEC Plus believes that the market will correct itself. Because, as I said, the price hike is not related to fundamentals. It's not only related to fundamentals. But
it is, I suppose, a lot to do with that fundamental balance of supply demand. At $7 or $8 takes you down to the low 80s. Maybe a less painful threshold for many consuming countries. But as Omar indicates, are we going to get there? Because these issues don't feel like, from his analysis, will be resolved anytime soon. Let's leave it there. It wraps up the Middle East week for us with the Brent crude oil trading at fairly flat this morning, sort of little change really in Asian trade today. Be interesting to see how the inflation number coming out of the US, will that sort of shock things moving in one direction or another, not as bad as expected or worse than expected, and then really putting some wind into the sails to an ever tightening heavy first move by the Fed. The Fed only get to move first once. And if they don't use it as a big punch, then they can't, it's unlikely they can use that again. So that's one to watch. Thank you so much, Carol. Really appreciate the insights as always, Omar and Reem. Great to have all of you. Italy, Abu Dhabi, actually, Carol. I was going to say Germany, but Omar, of course, in Bahrain. Thank you all. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back Sunday, 10:30 UAE time. All the best.
Okay.
Thank you.